In over 3 decades, I've learned that truly great car dealerships are only great because of one thing: leadership. So I'm sitting down with the great men and women inspiring automotive on TimTalks, automotive leadership and beyond. Welcome, everyone, to yet another episode of TimTalks Leadership and Beyond. And I know I get pretty excited about every one of these that we do. But look, this automotive space is just filled with incredible humans. And this one I have known, I had the privilege to meet in way back in 2016 when she worked for Earnhardt and was really leading the charge on getting our platform, CarNow, into that group. And since then, you see her come up time and time again, almost every single show. People, whether it's Digital Dealer or DMSC or MRC or a SodaCon or Business Bourbon Cigars, like she's everywhere. And we're going to unpack that today on what makes her tick and her leadership and what she wants to bring to the space. So without further ado, I want to bring my dear friend for now, 9 years, the one and only April Simmons. April, thank you so much for taking a few minutes out of your crazy. In fact, I was going through LinkedIn this morning and I turned on CBT News and you're there. And I was like, yep, I got the right person on this. So April, listen, buddy, welcome and thank you for being on TimTalks.
You know, I'm super excited to be here. And to your point, yeah, I have a lot of conversations and I get out there. But this one, when you said, hey, you want to come on TimTalks, I was super excited because you are like my OG. You are one of my favorite people. And I like to do business with people that I like. And we've known each other almost a decade. It's one of those things I like to brag about and say, hey, I'm an OG. You just, all you have to sit down. Because I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think I was your second client in Phoenix, period.
Yes, you were.
First store.
Yeah.
So here in Arizona. So that I do like to, I get bragging rights for that. But it's interesting because people are like, oh, you have his cell phone number. I'm like, I've had it since 2016 because like it wasn't just, it's still so hard in our space and people don't understand what we have to go through to get a yes on a contract. But what you and I had to go through when you are a thought leader, when you're the first one to step out and try something new and do something different, you have to go through way more hoops and hurdles because there's not already these questions answered, right? When you're creating the path, right, it's a little more difficult to get people to say yes. And so you were so amazing going through. I mean, it was the ringer, like it was the ringer, absolute ringer to getting us to the finish line. And you didn't give up and I didn't give up and we made it there. And now here we are almost a decade later.
Crazy, a decade, and I'm a grandpa. I mean, things changed in 10 years. So gray hair, all of it changes. All of it changes.
Yeah. Can't eat the pizza. I dyed blonde on the top, Tim. Blonde on the top. So when the grays pop through, they're not as
Awesome. I just want to dive into it. Give a little bit, because I want to get into your story and especially what you're doing now. And we had an incredible just talk in Scottsdale, and I want to unpack that a little bit at the tail end. That's exciting. What you're, what really driving you now. But give it a little bit. I know a lot of people have seen you out and about. For that person that hasn't, like, give a little bit of background. How did you get in the automotive space? Your story, Horne, what you're doing there. Kind of give us a Reader's Digest for you younger folks. That used to be a really small magazine that would come to the house and they had really short stories. So for everyone under 40, Reader's Digest version just means a short version. Sorry for the public service announcement, but yes, give us your background.
Story, right? Like the real.
Right. Just
for the new people.
Dragnet. Give me the facts, ma'am. Only the facts.
So it's interesting. People, they always say you were either born in the car business or you fell in the car business. I fell into the car business. I grew up in Nebraska, which a lot of people don't know that. I've lived in Arizona since 1999. But back in 1996, I was managing restaurants and unfortunately got into a really bad car accident. And that car accident meant that I could no longer physically do my job And I knew that I wanted to get into business of some sort. So I actually applied to become a teller at a bank. And fast forward just a couple short months, and they put me into the loan department. And this particular bank actually bought all of the loans for the car dealerships in Omaha, in Nebraska. This is how I learned about the car business. And this is before, and I'll age myself incredibly because this was, 1996, a long time ago. We weren't faxing credit apps. This is when the car dealership still brought applications to the bank. We sat down and made these determinations.
And that was before Beacon Score, I think, or it just came, you counted up all the ones, all the twos. Yeah, I remember.
Like literally old school. What is the collateral? What is the character? Like you literally had little, buckets that we put all these things in to make determination. And I had to do dealer reserve by hand. There was no fancy programs and things of that nature. So it was really an interesting time. In fact, so funny. I remember at the bank when we first got these guys, right? And it's a mouse.
Okay.
Being young, I being young was easy to adapt, but a lot of people at the bank really struggled with using a mouse, so much so that I would have to take my hand over their hand and help them kind of learn how to use a mouse, right? So, and I share that because I think of people like Jim Ziegler, who is so important to my life as well. And he always was evolving no matter what age he got to. And so I think that's something that just resonates with me to always say, like, don't be scared of the mouse, right? So today it might be AI. When you and I met, it was chat. It evolved to digital retailing, right? There's all these things. But I think that the most important thing we can remember, and if you want to stay relevant, is to not be scared of the new thing. And so when I say I'm a pioneer, I say I'm just not scared to try things. Now, I might try it and be like, this was hot garbage. So I'm also the first one to say, okay, throw it in the garbage when we need to. Like, don't try to make it work if it doesn't work, but try new things. Because new things turn into stuff that we all take for granted now. I mean, like to say a mouse, right? We would be like, what? Like that was a thing? Yeah, that was a thing that was difficult for people to, adapt to. Something so simple that now is like having a second hand.
That's crazy. In fact, there was a very quick story. Kerry Cave, who was one of the early people here at CarNow, he was talking about he was working for another company and he delivered, some computers for their software, and I think it was Lot Links, which was incredible back in the not Lot Links, what was it? Least Profit, or one of those. Yeah. They gave you the whole computer and this and that, and market scan, like all that stuff. So he had a dealer, like a sales manager, calling me. He said, I got a problem. He said, what's your problem? He said, I can't use this computer. It's messed up. He said, what are you talking about? He said, the keyboard's not in alphabetical order. And Kerry said, yeah, you've got a problem.
Sure. And it's so true. But that's when I started the business. That's how I got into the car business. And then I actually moved to the suburbs of Chicago for a bit, sold insurance. So kind of learned the insurance side. And here was April, in 1999, moved to Arizona, said I want to get onto the retail side of automotive now. And walked in saying, hey, I can sell insurance. I know all about this stuff. So like, put me in finance, right? So how naive of me. That's not how it works. So I actually did office work. I did finance backup. I sold cars. I did all of the things, and then moved into finance. I spent 8 years in the finance department, fought tooth and nail to get on the desk. And back then, there were very, very few women in automotive at all, and certainly not women on the desk. So it was very difficult for them to consider to put me on the desk. But I finally fought long and hard enough and got on the desk. Spent 7 years as a desk manager, and then had my GM call me one day and say, April, I keep hiring internet people and they can't sell. You can sell. I need you to go learn the internet.
Oh, yeah.
That's actually how I ended up in the internet department. And I was probably not the right choice because back then I was the last one to do things. Like I was the last one to go from, tapes to CDs.
Yeah.
I was the last one to go from right. My dad was better at email than I was. He would call me and leave me a voicemail to tell me he sent me an email because I didn't check it very often. So right, so I was like, I don't know. I think you guys might be wrong about putting April back there, but I knew that that was where this business was headed. I could see the writing already on the wall. And so I thought, well, you got to learn it. This is actually how I started to first learn marketing because I understood I needed to, in my quest to know it all and understand it all so that I could make better decisions for my department and really help grow this thing. I needed to understand where these things came from and how it all worked. And back then I literally would just call every vendor and I'd be like, hey, come in, tell me, this guy said this. What do you say? Like I literally just put vendors against each other. But what that did was help me learn.
Yeah.
Is they would show me and they would take the time to explain to me what vendor A came in and said, why they were so great, why they may or may have been right or wrong. And over time, that just helped me to learn. But what I really will tell people, and still to this day, where everyone I think fails when they're evolving or adapting in this business, is the main thing is still the main thing.
Yep.
1980, 1990,
yep.
2000, 2010, 2020,
yep.
Nothing has actually changed. So it's just the method of which we communicate that has changed. Now we're on our cell phones and now we email and now we do now we have digital retailing. Now we have, platforms like this where you and I aren't even in the same state and we can have conversations. These things are just methods of communication, but buying and selling cars, the meat and potatoes of it has not changed. So all I did was took the steps of the sale, everything that I knew in retail automotive and applied it into the internet department. And I will tell you, that's my secret sauce. When everyone says, April, what's your secret sauce to success? I said, it's real simple. I didn't try to change what works. I just adapted the method of communication.
That's amazing. And then you've been at, how long have you been at Horne?
So fast forward, I built 3 different internet departments. I then still had my sights on wanting to be a GM, became a GSM, did some GM work for a little while. And then the Hornes reached out about me becoming a GM at one of their stores. And I said, I don't want to do that anymore. I kind of outlined what my current role is. And I said, this is what you need. You need a person to help you build these departments, to understand the vendors, to hold people accountable, to work with operations and tech stack and all these different things. And they said, we agree. So I came in and I built their department starting in 2017 at the Kia location. And then in 2018, they moved me to the corporate role. So I've been in the corporate position here with Horne Auto Group in Arizona since 2018.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that. In fact, I remember you touring, you gave me a tour of the BDC on my first Scottsdale tour or Phoenix tour. And so anyway, yeah, incredible stuff. I want to touch base on, I'm seeing I don't want to say a movement. How do we get more, when obviously automotive is a heavily male dominated space. Mm-hmm. But when I look, and as I'm a front row seat, courtside cheerleader to what you're doing, Brooke, who all you have to say is Brooke. Everybody knows facts and feelings. What Brooke is doing, Laura Halter, Liz. It goes on and on. Why is it? Because I don't know, like there's so many incredible women in automotive and they're not just average, like they're crushing it. Like, what do you think, how do we attract more women to automotive than now? Because I think that, there's this wall, especially when people either come onto the lot or they come into the service drive, like every single lady service advisor that I've ever met dominates the service drive. Like, Like, what do you think? How can we break through? And this was unscripted. I'm just asking. Like, there's so many incredible humans that are ladies in our space that are not only just surviving, they're kicking the door down. How do we get more women in the space? Because if I was a dealer principal, I would try to hire as many, nothing against, I mean, obviously I'm going to hire the most qualified person, but I mean, how do we get more? Because more than not, they just knock the door down and start dominating. How do we do that?
Well, first things first, you have to really take a look in the mirror and say, what is most important to you, pride or paycheck?
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, a lot of women have come into this space, but there have been just as many, if not more, that have left the space.
Yeah.
And so if we want to attract more women to the space, step number one is retain the ones that come in. The ones that say, I'm willing to come and try and give this a whirl. We need to work on retaining those. And unfortunately, what happens is men, and a generalization, right? Because we're talking generalizations here, but men tend to have a pride about them, that ego, that space that says, you're not supposed to let a girl beat you. Okay. And to everything you just said, it's absolutely true. Women tend to dominate in sales because men customers are not intimidated by them. Number one, female customers make 80% of the decision making, and a female recognizes that in herself and tends to actually talk to the decision maker, where a lot of men still have that, like, well, we're on the golf course and it's just us buddy old pal old chums, and men's make the decisions, and you're not going to let little old miss tell you what to do, right? That mentality still exists so much, both in the way that they sell, but also then how they deal with working with females. So when they start to have this mentality of, well, I have to beat the girl, then they start to make things uncomfortable for the women, right? Like, then it becomes this competition. And when it becomes competitive, there tends to be those, those side cuts, those jabs, those things. And that tends to then create a space where women don't want to be. So I would tell you that if we want to attract more women, start with retaining women and do it in a sense to say, what matters more to you? Do you want to make more money, or does your pride matter more? If you're actually honest with yourself and you say the paycheck matters more than the pride, then I think we will solve the problem almost overnight. But unfortunately, pride is still
and look, and I'm going to date myself, but I was, full disclosure, I was 17 years old. 17. Wasn't officially legal, right? And I was selling cars in Florence, Kentucky, and I talk about it. It's a leadership talk all the time. And I was, so this is not, please, this is not, we're not bashing anybody. We're not, it's just pride in general. And pride can be, is had by male and female. And I'm telling you that way back in 1989, as a 17-year-old kid, I started kicking the door down, and I was selling a bunch of cars because I didn't know any better. I went to work. I didn't go to work to wait around and smoke and joke and see what I was going to have for lunch and all that other stuff, although I ate lunch, right? But the old guard, as I call, not to be ugly, but the guys with the big old pot belly smoking cigarettes. By the way, it was a brand new dealership, brand new. You still smelled the paint, but it was in Kentucky, and it had ashtrays on every sales desk. That's how old I am. So anyway, but they were getting in my head. How many hours you working? You're not really making that much money. And a sales manager saw that. So I was even getting beat up and discouraged. And I'm a dude. I was just the kid. Right? So I don't think it's even, I think it's just pride. And it took which is a whole other leadership talk. It took a manager. In fact, I just went to Jake Sweeney 2 weeks ago and at corporate, and one of the gentlemen there was there. And I said, can you please find Dave? So Dave, if you're out there, I know you're probably up there in years because I'm 53 now and I was 17. But I would love to just hug your neck, because he took me a walk, and it was a 10-minute talk, walked me up the hill, pointed at a house across from the dealership and said, son, don't listen to the noise. You've got so much talent. You can have a house like that in this business. And it was that 10-minute talk that really set me on the course, where I didn't listen to the noise. So I think in general, pride and insecurity, right? And they're one and the same, quite frankly. They're closely tied. I think every evil thing that happens in this world stems from pride. That's a whole other message. But I just getting rid of the noise. But I'm impressed, and I see it, and I see the encouragement that you guys kind of you're a club per se, like and you feed off each other, and I just think it's great, and I just want to get, again, all of us as leaders. If I'm back at the dealership, I think healthy competition is good without demeaning anyone and that drive, but I would definitely be on the lookout for as many amazing women as I possibly could, and human beings to fill those spaces.
I mean, I would say, Tim, my number one piece of advice to dealer principals and general managers or desk managers, right? We came up in a different time, right? We were not always treated the best, right? We were expected to work 100-hour weeks. I mean, genuinely, like, and people are like 100 hours. I'm like, no, like, genuinely, I can go back and tell you there are many, many weeks that we worked that hard. And I think that is one of the other things that holds not only women, but men and now younger people going, well, that doesn't even make sense. Why would you do that? So I think we also have to say this, and this is the words that I use. We need to treat people the way we wish we were treated, not necessarily the way that we were.
Yeah, that's strong.
Because in order to truly evolve, evolution, right, is about being better than what you were handed, right?
Yeah.
The whole goal of being a better, I want to be a better parent than my parents were to me. I hope that my child becomes a better parent than I was, that we learn a little bit from those mistakes so that we don't have to always have the exact same mistakes in generation by generation. So if we want to do that, and we want to bring more women in, and we want to make more money, and we want to sell more and service more cars, and we don't want to burn people out, and we don't want to have, suicide and alcoholism and all the different things, then we have to make change, and we can't just go, well, that's what I went through, so they deserve to go through what I had to go through.
Yep.
That's the mentality that jacks up evolving, right? That's why, an alcoholic parent has an alcoholic child has, because we go, well, they did it, so I'm going to do it. If you decide to choose to be the human that says, I'm going to do it different, then you will help to make the thing move and evolve. But if you say, I'm going to treat everyone who works for me like crap because I was treated like crap, then you're not going to actually have change.
The common denominator, we've had Patrick Abad, we've had Kevin Deutsch, we've had so many great leaders that they lead the complete opposite of probably the way they grew up. In fact, I know for a fact, Kevin, because Kevin's a few years older than me, throwing papers in your face, all that stuff. But he encourages his people. Patrick encourages their people. They love on their people. They hold them accountable. And true culture, we've said in here many, many times, is when, not everybody has a perfect month, but when someone fails to hit their number, they go into your office and say, boss, I apologize that I let you down, right? That type of culture to where you're pouring into some people that they care about you and they don't want to let you down. I think it's, guys, we've had so many, we're saying the same. The funny thing is, I was getting ready, Rob produces this show. I know he's on the back end listening and all this. There's so many familiar things that April just said that are just true, that are just absolutely true. I want to pivot as we go to the back half and land the plane of the podcast. And I felt very honored. I will tell you, and we don't have to get into any personal stuff, but at the last DMSC event at the Brian Pass, shout out to Brian, but at the last event, you just asked if I could talk, if I had a few minutes, and I felt honored that you wanted to pick my brain. But as we started talking, I think there comes a point in your life, and I don't know what exact age that is. Maybe, for some people, it might be 30. For some people, it might be 40, but you start thinking, like, what difference am I going to make in this world? Like, what mode? And I ask you a simple question. I have the privilege, I don't know why, I'm just a hillbilly from Kentucky, but I listen to people and I love on people and I try to encourage. But I ask you a question. And the question was simple, and it was how I lead every conversation when people, whether they want my advice on what their next step is and how to do some things. And And that was what brings you joy. And let's just start there. As you talk about your second mountain in life, can you just give, and maybe it's a Reader's Digest, you go as long as you want, but let's talk about that question, because I think with so many of us, ladies and gentlemen, leaders, to be the true leaders that we need to be, when you've reached that mountain, and I think we're always striving, but you've got, however, 20,000 followers on LinkedIn, whatever that is for you, but that second mountain, like what brings you joy? Will you just unpack that a little bit, that conversation that you had with me sitting outside at that table at DMSC?
Yes. First things first, though, I just want to thank you again for taking that time, because it is really, you've been a big part of my life for almost a decade, right? And I watch what you do. I watch how you pour into other people. So I knew that you were the person that I wanted to have that conversation with. And the fact that you agreed to take your time during a very busy time for you at a conference, it's a busy time for somebody like yourself, because you're working a lot of avenues to take that time, meant the world to me. So again, thank you for that.
Of course.
But the second mountain thing, so this really stems from a few different things for me as you start to transition in your life. And for me, there's a core difference of old April, first mountain April, and new April, second mountain April. And here's where, to me, the defining line is. In my first mountain, I'm going to be honest and vulnerable to tell you, I was a flying monkey. Mm-hmm. And a friend of mine, like she coined that phrase. So, and I use it now because it's exactly what I was. Even when I didn't agree with something, sometimes I had to just do the thing that I was told to do to survive, right? I think a lot of times in our first mountain, we make decisions in survival mode, right? I have to pay my own bills. I have a child to support. I have a husband to support. I have all these things that are determined upon me making a paycheck, right? And thus decisions are made based on money, not necessarily based on joy. Mm. There's an aspect where you hit a spot in your life where you get a freedom. And that freedom comes from being able to now transition choice making away from survival and money to joy and what is it that I like to do and what do I want to do and where do I want to be. And that happened for me with, my son moving out and graduating college, and my husband and I are, 4 years away from him retiring. And so there's a spot now in my life where I go, oh, no, I can make choices for me. And when you start to suddenly have that after decades of not having it, it's a freedom, but it's also kind of scary because you don't necessarily fully know what brings you joy. It's taken me the better part of this year in having multiple conversations with people that I love, trust. I'm in a group with Liza Borges and Danelle Delgado, who have been life-changing with women in automotive there. Some of the other women that you mentioned earlier that I've had the opportunity to be a big part of my life since 2019. There's so much foundational things that have happened in my life in the last 6-7 years to have me look in the mirror and answer that question to him, what brings April Simmons joy? So that I can figure out, what do I want to do with my life now that I have a choice, right? And some people say, well, April, you always had a choice. And I will say, yes and no, right? I think there's an aspect where there is some things that we do when our kids are young and stuff that are different. What are the sacrifices you're willing to make? I was not willing to sacrifice my son potentially not having a roof over his head, right?
Right.
Well, I was going to do those things. So anyway, that all being said, trying to land the plane, what brings me joy, really, truly, number one is problem solving. I've always just loved solving problems. When somebody else can't figure it out and I'm like, ooh, give it to me, give me the tough problem. I love solving problems. I think that's why I enjoy operations so much and tech stack and trying new things, because I'll vet out all the issues and where we can make it better. I like to make things better, but I really love to make people better.
Mm.
I really love, some of my biggest wins have not been my best paycheck. I honestly couldn't even tell you when my number one paycheck is going back all these years. But what I can tell you is the stories of the humans who have told me I changed their life.
Mm.
I can tell you date, time, exact words used in a text message or a conversation. So I can tell you that my joy comes from being the foundation of evolution, I think is what I would call it, right? Like saying, hey, if I can now help you learn all these lessons that I learned the hard way and give you that foundation to where you don't have to start from scratch, right? You can start from, the second story of the house, not the foundation of the house, then how much better are you going to be? And so I really realized that, education and empowering people, and I want to empower people regardless of their leader. Okay.
Mm.
When you talk about these podcasts or me going and talking on stages or giving away my playbook for free or talking to other people in my industry who have nothing to do with my group and taking my personal time, it's because I want every human to be empowered, regardless of whether they have somebody who is willing to teach them at their dealership or they have a great leader at their dealership or what have you. I think every person should be able to be successful in this business with all the tools like Zooms and StreamYards and LinkedIn's and all these tools we now have we didn't have. Everyone should be able to be empowered to be successful.
April, I love that. In fact, that's really what inspired this podcast, this leadership podcast, because I have the privilege sometimes when my flights are delayed and we almost run into another plane like last week, which is a whole other story. It's not as lovely, but in all seriousness, I do have the privilege of weekly meeting with some of the best human beings and the best operators, and sometimes not so much, and being able to help those people out. Because I can remember at the dealership, I was, I never went to a conference, I never listened to anything. I had an idea. There was a BMW store that was selling a ton of cars, and I kind of tried to mimic down the street. So I tried to mimic what they were doing, and then we started selling a bunch of cars. But I wanted to be able to take what a Patrick did, or a Troy Duhan did, or a Kevin Deutsch did, or one of these, to that, maybe it's a small dealer in Dothan, Alabama, right? That here's the playbook. Hey, try these different things, because at the end of the day, it's about leadership. And as I said before, it's the great philosopher Michael Jackson once said, we got to start with a man or a woman in the mirror. And are you looking at your face, and have you, and it really comes down to that. And I quote this a zillion times. Kevin Deutsch said, most people in the automotive business, the reason they're not successful is they go to work to wait. They don't go to work to work. And it is amazing how lucky you become when you just work. When you just work. We show up at 9 o'clock for our shift. We're smoking and joking. We're looking at social media. What are we going to have for lunch at 10? Seriously. I love what you said. In fact, I won't tell anybody else the title, but I am working on a book, and I am going to quote you in there. I love what you said, being the foundation of evolution, of their evolution, because at the same time, it all starts with the renewing of your mind.
Right.
We are so, as human beings, we are so comfortable. I had this talk with a Ford dealer yesterday. He pulled me in and thanked me for as I was encouraging him. I said, your people, so many people, sometimes you got to make tough decisions, because so many people are comfortable being comfortable. Yep. I was comfortable at a Lexus dealership. My bills were paid. I didn't, but I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to step out. I wanted something that I could call my own, that we could go change something, and I think that second mountain for you, I've known it firsthand, being able to pour into people. I see the people taking notes when you speak. It's always easy when someone's trying to cross a minefield to ask the person on the other side how to get across. And that is, ladies and gentlemen, all we are trying to do here on TimTalks. I am definitely not the smartest person in the room. I'm trying to bring those people to you and show you how to to get across that minefield. April, I'm going to let you land the plane. Any final thoughts for our listeners? I know this goes out to, everybody in all the Car Now users, which is over 30,000 people a week, plus people on a podcast and everything else. So with that big audience, what do you want to say to them to land the plane?
I think it'll just be this: don't overcomplicate things. Show up every day. I always do a word of the year, and so I'll share my word of the year this year is Kaizen, because I think that is continuous improvement. Kaizen stands for continuous improvement, and I think that is something that if you're doing that every day, if you're giving gratitude every day, if
that's the key.
Trying to do something, to learn something new every day. I mean, this is my my book of just, thoughts and notes, and I just jot these things down. And then the ones that really, really resonate get kind of my first sticky note. And I will tell you, Tim, you have two in my sticky note, right? That are things that Tim has said to me that I'm like, yeah, that's gold right there. And these are the things that on tough days or days where I find myself moving away from making the main thing the main thing. Okay. I think too much in automotive, we're really guilty of getting away from making the main thing the main thing. I might just pop in and take 5 minutes to listen to a Tim talk, or go to LinkedIn and look at something that is going to help get my mind turned back into the right channel so that I can actually perform. So I think that's my biggest piece of advice is in 2025 and beyond, there's no excuse for not doing the best you can do and finding resources and work on that continuous improvement. Do something every day that makes yourself just a little better.
Ladies and gentlemen,
free audio post-production
from the one and only April Simmons. April, thank you so much for taking a few minutes to come on with us. It sounds like we're going to need to do a second session to get it all in, because there's a lot of other questions I would like to ask, but we'll save that for the part 2 of this particular conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, we've just tried to make ourselves a little better today. Hopefully we've made you a little better today. I just want to be a little better. I want to be a better daddy, a better husband, a better leader. I want to eat better than I did yesterday. That is the key. Let's get better today than we were yesterday. And the first step, and April said it, and we've said it on here hundreds of times, is the key, I think, is to start your day with gratitude. Because at the end of the day, most of us have it. In fact, probably all of us listening to this podcast have it so much better. And we need to be thankful for that than most folks. So thank you. We love you. Thanks again. Until next time, we will see you again on TimTalks, where we always say, no one is smarter than everyone. Let's just continue to get better together. We'll see you next time.